We've got an exciting story breaking overnight.
Fascinating story raises all sorts of interesting questions.
It is an amazing story.
This may be the most important story.
Several developing stories.
There is much more to this story.
You've heard about the story.
Lo que está ocurriendo aquí hoy es de verdad importante. Una historia.
They say that in modern war there aren't any front lines anymore. Here, there certainly are.
It is more emotional. It is more visceral because people understand this is now the law of the land.
The latest American city shattered by mass murder. We speak to the community about their stories of survival.
Markets are down sharply as we move through this final day of the trading week.
A lot of people have something difficult happen in their lives and they move on. You're different. You turn it into a mission.
You say all the hard parts out loud.
But you know you have to.
The town that you grew up in has a highest rate of dementia and Alzheimer's. What's your emotional response to that?
There is a transformative power in storytelling.
I want to cut through some of the weedsy stuff and let's just get to the point.
Should we expect some form of an announcement?
I'm Mike Tirico, and this is what we're here for.
To the pylon!
Let's go!
Luigi time!
Bigger. Why do they always have to go bigger?
Come get me, come on! I am Puss in Boots.
You ever gamble because you can make a killing?
Nah.
Finally, you're learning how to live.
Holla! We're just getting started.
Let's race.
And we look forward to hearing those stories for years to come.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to NBCU Academy's third Next Level Summit. We are all storytellers. I'm Silvana Henao, headline reporter for CNBC and CNBC en Español, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have you here today. Whether you work in news, entertainment, sports, or even at a major theme park and resort, storytelling is a key skill you need to learn. Throughout this day, you'll hear from world-class storytellers from across Comcast, NBCUniversal, and beyond. We hope to leave you with some key takeaways to help you take your storytelling to the next level. We now have over 3,200 people registered for today's event. Here's what to expect. Over the next few hours, you'll have the opportunity to interact live with our all-star panelists. Starting with NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt, who will interview top leaders from our news division, Universal Orlando Resort, NBCUniversal TV and streaming, and the entertainment wing of Telemundo. Then we'll head to Los Angeles to hear from the team behind the brand new Super Nintendo World, find out how these storytellers use their skills to keep you captivated from the moment you step foot in one of our destinations and experiences. After that, you'll have a choice of joining 4 breakout sessions. NBC News correspondent Laura Barrett will interview 2 of the directors behind the Oscar-nominated film Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, the director behind Fast 10, executive producer Will Packer, and the vice president of NBC Films. Chanel Jones, co-host of the third hour of Today, will discuss storytelling in news with some of our top executives and correspondents. MSNBC Reports anchor Yasmin Vasugian will look at storytelling through a TV director's lens, including the director of Meet the Press and the legendary former director of The Oprah Winfrey Show. Get advice on how to sell your company's story, whether you're in marketing, public relations, or sales with Donnie Deutsch, host of the podcast On Brand with Donnie Deutsch. And right after those exciting breakout sessions, we'll have a special message from NBCUniversal Newsgroup Chairman Cesar Conde, followed by a one-on-one with Perlina Igbokwe, chairman of the Universal Studio Group. Find out how she works with a team of dynamic storytellers to bring us some of the most compelling shows on the air right now. But that's not all. Right after that one-on-one with Perlina, you'll have the choice of 3 career expo rooms, learn what it takes to be a dynamic documentary filmmaker, get tips on how to craft your elevator pitch, or learn about the hundreds of job opportunities at NBCUniversal theme parks around the globe. NBCU Academy is a program focused on training the next generation of journalists and content creators, building a pipeline from classrooms to the newsroom and the media industry. This free virtual summit is just one of the many ways NBCU Academy advances excellence in journalism, media, and tech, and helps students and professionals in these fields grow their careers. We were so proud to recently announce 15 new partner schools servicing underrepresented communities, bringing the total number of partner schools to 45. Students from 3 of those partner schools are standing by live to pepper our panelists with questions throughout the day. We're live at Florida International University in North Miami and Cal State Fullerton near Los Angeles, where students from Cal State and El Camino College are gathered to participate in today's summit. And if you're watching us from home, you can submit questions live in the Q&A tab on your screen. And if you stick around for our Career Expo rooms a little later today, you'll be able to come on camera and engage with our panelists. But before we get started with our first panel, here's a quick message on storytelling from John Leguizamo, actor, executive producer, and host of MSNBC Films and NBC News Studios. Leguizamo does America.
Hey, what's up? I'm John Leguizamo with NBCU Academy and Next Level Summit. The importance of storytelling to me, well, it's everything to me because I was fed by storytellers, I was brought up by storytellers, and my whole life has been about storytelling. I think we all strive to tell the best story, and that's what's driven me my whole life, to tell the story that means the most to me. Stories that have resonance within me and to people who look like me, and to the young people who look like me, who haven't seen themselves represented, haven't heard their voices being told. Obviously, great stories and universal stories affect us all, but it's also great to see yourself represented in those stories, because then it has a little extra resonance, because then the subliminal message is that you can do it, that you can be one of these storytellers, that you can be here. Without that, it doesn't necessarily make you feel like you can be one of the storytellers. And then that's what's important to me.
Our thanks to John Leguizamo for sharing his storytelling insights. I will see you back here in a bit, but for now, let me hand it over to my colleague, NBC Nightly News anchor, Lester Holt. Hi, Lester.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Next Level Summit. I am Lester Holt, anchor and managing editor of NBC Nightly News. Every day at NBC News, we strive to bring you news from all around the world, but we also strive to bring you memorable stories and the right teleprompter, too. We air every night, often move viewers. What we say makes them see the world in a different way or inspire them to take action. Storytelling skills are essential, not just in our business as journalists, but in the work of so many of my colleagues here at NBCUniversal across the brand. Today, we're joined by some of the other storytelling leaders in our field across news, movies, parks, and television to hear about their vision for storytelling and how it impacts their industries. We're also going to be joined today by students from our NBCU Academy partner schools. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas is live with students at Florida International University in what they call their Ratcliffe Incubator. Also joining us today are students from Cal State University Fullerton and El Camino College on the campus of Cal State. Joining me today on our first panel of storytelling, Rashida Jones, the president of MSNBC. Karen Irwin, President and Chief Operating Officer of Universal Studios Orlando. Val Borland, Executive Vice President of Content Acquisition at NBCUniversal. And Karen Barrieta, Executive Vice President of NBCU Telemundo Enterprises. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone for letting me be a part of this. This is important what we do. Obviously, at Nightly News, what we do is tell stories every night. But I think we all, in our daily communication, are telling stories in some way, what we represent, what our values are, how we want to engage with people. So this is a really important conversation. I'm proud to be kind of kicking it off. Let me just go around the horn. First question is, can each of you talk briefly about what you do and how important storytelling is to your business? Rashid, I'll start with you.
Sure thing. So storytelling is at the center of our business. I'm the president of MSNBC, so everything that falls under that brand, from television to streaming to digital, things we haven't even thought of to invent yet. And so as far as storytelling, it's the center of what we do. Our focus, our our way to bring the world to our audience is through telling stories. And so as we think about how to craft the day, no matter what platform it is, our vehicle to get there is to tell those stories.
All right, Karen, let me turn to you.
Sure. Well, our job is to actually create an environment where we put you in the story. So it's a little bit different. I consider us kind of guardians of storytelling, but we create those environments where you really can't see the difference. You step right in and you're part of the story.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Val, give us your take on storytelling in your business.
So very simply, I'm responsible for curating, evaluating, and purchasing the content that our viewers see on our streaming and TV platforms. So, you know, I have a big responsibility of bringing the stories to our viewers directly. So storytelling is a big part of what I do. All
right, and Karen B, in this case.
I'm the head of Telemundo Global Studios, and we produce long-form content, scripted content for Telemundo in the U.S., in Mexico, Colombia, even in Turkey. And for us, storytelling is our bread and butter. Our work is to curate, to find, create, develop the stories, great stories that people really care about and that people want to watch. And if we put in perspective, there are so many scripted series out there. Just in the last decade, they doubled in number from 266 in 2011 to 559 in 2022. And that's no counting Asian, Latin America. So competition is fierce. And for us, you know, we invest a lot of time and resources in storytelling.
And I'll stay with you, because this is another question for the entire group, though. For each of you, what makes a good story, and what are ways to elevate that story from good to great, to knock it out of the park?
The secret formula doesn't exist, otherwise we would all buy it. I would definitely copyright it, but there are three things that for us are important. The first one is target audience. We really need to think, who are we targeting this particular scripted series for? And if we have that clear, you know, we can make the story resonate, be relevant to them, and be attractive to viewers. Secondly, where are we going to base our story? You know, what's going to be the theme? And for us, our biggest successes have been on true events and real life characters. That seems to work really well for us. And then authenticity. You know, people consume so much content. They watch a lot and they have a nose to feel the authenticity on a story. So when characters are vulnerable and they're honest, people tend to watch them more, and becomes very powerful.
And Val, I'm sure you get a lot of pitches. What makes a great story?
Yeah,
How do you take it to that next level? I have a lot of examples, yeah. For me, you know, stories that are easy to follow, that are easy to get into. You know, I have examples recently like White Lotus, Ted Lasso. Everyone, you know, really got into those. Even if stories are complex, with complex characters or dialogue, like a Succession or a Game of Thrones, people can still find themes that are relatable in there, you know, the themes of family, you know, stories that are familiar, that feel like comfort food. We have a couple of examples of that on Peacock recently, like Best Man and Bel Air, just feels very familiar. Or even, you know, new you know, takes on familiar formats like Poker Face, which has been very successful for us. But I would think you'd have to nurture some of these along.
Yes.
That, okay, here's an idea. I kind of like this. I see where they're going.
Exactly.
Let's make it work.
Exactly. But you need to have the essence and kind of the DNA that people can relate to, I think. And relatability, I think, is definitely there. And I think, to answer your question about what makes it great, I think for me, you can kind of sometimes find that out after the fact, and because everyone thinks you have a great story, but it's really the way people relate to it. I think one of the ways to know if a story is really great is the repeatability. How much people, like, even think of a story that gets told over and over again. With a TV show, how many times people can watch it, or people tell you, have you seen this show? Oh, you have to see this show. The repeatability, the stickiness of the story.
Yeah, it's funny. So many of our conversations now, just interpersonal, are, what are you watching right
now?
You know,
exactly.
what's working for you? Anyway, we're going to turn now, if we can, to Cal State Fullerton for a question from one of our students. Tell me what your question is.
Yes, hi Lester, and hi to all the panelists. Quick question. I basically just want to know what qualities led you guys to your high positions that you're at now. And I forgot to introduce myself, but my name's Alexis Ray Johnson, folks, in my last year, and also graduated from El Camino and transferred to Fullerton.
All right, great to have you. Great question. Rashida, you want to take that?
Sure. Good morning, Alexis. Exciting to hear from you. So I think there's probably a theme that you'll see from all of the leaders up here who happen to be women, but these are the folks running NBCUniversal. And I think it's just this desire for success. I think in a lot of our cases, and we've all interacted in many ways over the years, it's a desire to perform at a high level. Like either you have that urge or you don't. And I think one of the things for me that drove me was not only the desire to have influence, but also understanding and the confidence to know that you can do that. And so as I think about, my path and in various ways, we've all talked about our own paths, I think that's the commonality that you see is kind of the belief that you can do it, the opportunity to do it, and then the hard work to get there.
All right, Karen, do you want to take the Karen?
Sure. Well, I would add to that incessant curiosity.
Yeah.
I am continually looking for ways to learn and grow and understand more about all the businesses around me, not just mine. And I think that's really kind of elemental in really progressing through a career. Mm-hmm. And the other one is do what you love to do.
Yeah.
Don't do jobs that you hate. I see too often people take roles or they think they want to get the next role because they think that's the right thing for them to do. Don't do that. Do what you love to do because that's what you're going to be really great at.
Yeah. I love how you put that. Let's go to a question now from our audience. Daniel asks, what skills should I develop over the next 4 years if I want a career in this industry when I graduate? Val, you want to take that?
Oof. I think just really being able to, these are going to sound so obvious, but they're not. Just being able to be able to take feedback, I think. We're talking about storytelling. Yeah. I think that when you talk about stories, especially people who have stories, they think of them as their babies. They're very personal about their stories. But you have to be able to take feedback and listen to feedback. And, it's like telling, someone that their kid isn't cute. Everyone thinks their kid is cute, and every kid is cute. Every kid is cute. But, I think being able to take constructive criticism, being able to edit, being able to step out and look back in. And I think that, in regards to storytelling, I think that is the biggest. I know you probably look at that all the time.
Yeah, so I'm laughing for two reasons. Yeah. One, the first time we met, we pretty quickly got to taking out pictures of the kids. Look at them.
Right. Aren't they
beautiful.
So cute? Right.
But
are you saying my kid isn't cute?
Beautiful. He's beautiful.
Okay.
No, totally beautiful.
This is going off the rails here really fast.
But there is that sense of fragility, and the other reason I reacted is, so our head of MSNBC Films, who you guys will hear from later, she refers to every project as a snowflake, right? It's fragile, It's unique. It may not be the right fit for that project, that platform, or that moment, but it doesn't take away from its uniqueness. And so I do think having a little bit of a thick skin when opportunities come up, when projects come up, and being able to say or understand that no means no for this specific reason, and is not an indictment on your hard work or your creativity and all of those things. And the only other thing I would add to kind of skill sets is I think one thing that I've been very envious of this generation is they're super entrepreneurial. You can go out and grab your device and go create content. And so as you're thinking about your time in school and in early career and preparing for your career, what can you do to go out there and try some of these things on for size? Go create. Go write a script. Go write an Go write an article. Go create a mini doc. These are things that you can do to kind of get your feet wet as you're preparing to go professional. internationally.
All right. I want to remind folks there's a Q&A tab on the screen there. You can tap on and ask a question if you want to be a part of this dialogue, or you could just lurk and watch this because there's some really interesting stuff coming here. Karen, if I can, explain to us how destinations and attractions can tell a good story. How does your team take a good story and make an experience out of it? You mentioned that you are part of the story.
Yeah, first of all, what we strive to do is take all the friction out of it. We want you to step into it and not think about the reality or how we created it.
That's why we go to these places.
Exactly, exactly. You want to feel like you literally stepped into the story, and that's all about detail, even minute detail that people may overlook, because fans of any story or of any intellectual property, they know the detail. They're sticklers for it, and you get a lot of credit when you can pull it off. But great stories that make great experiences are very rich in detail inherently. So, think about the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where there's already a Honeydukes in the story. They already talk about the candy that's in Honeydukes, whether they're fizzing Whizbees or chocolate frogs. And so being able to create that and put it on a shelf so when somebody walks in and sees it, like it was always there, like it was part of the story, is what we strive to do, so that you don't have to think about the real world or how it all happened. It's just kind of magic. You step into.
And I imagine what you do, you're planning so far ahead. I mean, how do these things start? Just one person says, "Hey, what if we do this?" Or is
Well, I think you asked a question earlier about how we choose the intellectual properties that we pursue. And we do look for that longevity and that richness in detail and relatability, because what we want to do is to have people connect with the experience on a very personal level. Even though they're with their friends and family, we want them to feel very personally connected to the story. And so when you talk about some of the intellectual properties that we've selected, whether it's Harry Potter, which is iconic, it also spans multi-generations. Nintendo, another brilliant property that, when we decided we wanted to do something with gaming, we intentionally chose Nintendo because it is multi-generational and you have that legacy factor, and the characters are amazing. And so it's not just about the gaming element, it is about the characters, the heart and soul of the characters and the stories.
Karen, you mentioned a moment ago being able to take criticism. I think, I'm sorry, Val, you mentioned about taking criticism. I think one of the things we fall into, certainly what I do when I sit down and write a story sometimes, is falling in love with a script. This is the only way it can be, and then having to listen to other voices. So can you talk a bit more about the pitch process and the different way that storytelling factors in to a pitch meeting?
Sure. So when people come in, the pitch process can happen in different phases, especially for me because I'm in the acquisition side of it as opposed to the development side. So pitches could come in where a project is already complete, so I'm actually seeing the product as it is in completion, or it could come in very early stages where it's just an idea or maybe in the script phase. So for me, I'm very lucky when it's complete because then we can see what we're getting. It's very easy to judge. When it's in the script phase or certainly in the idea phase, it's a little bit harder because you're more reliant on how the person pitching is creating that story for you. So it's really, you have to have a good storyteller sitting in front of you as they're pitching, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good. I've had situations where the person who created the show creator has felt so attached to the show that they've been the one to do the pitch, but they're not necessarily a good pitcher. They're a good show creator, but not good. They're not a good salesperson.
Yeah.
So it's a very dry, horrible pitch for something that's actually quite good. And we've said, oh, that's a shame. They shouldn't have been the one to do the pitch. So I've had some really great pitches for really not so great stuff. It's really bad pitches for some great stuff. But in all, it's always about the way the story is told and the way the story is presented, and the pitch itself is storytelling. And then, by the way, once that process is complete, I then have to turn around internally and tell a story, because I have to sit in front of Jeff Shell and Mark Lazarus and Francis Barrick and say, hi, I need millions of dollars to buy all this stuff. So I have to be a pretty good storyteller as well.
All right, well, let's go to a question from our audience. Manisha asking, will streaming platforms ever completely replace the traditional cinema viewing experience in theaters? Karen B, you want to take that?
I think it's always fun to go to the movies, and we're trying to bring people back, right? But I don't think it's going to disappear, the traditional way of watching television as we grow a little older. We like, staying in our couch and watching a show. Not necessarily watching a small screen. It's always enticing, especially when we talk about superheroes and great IPs that you want to see all of the details. So for me, there is a space for all.
Anybody else want to take that about streaming?
I'm just thinking about as a consumer, and there are some moments or projects where I'm happy to pay $20 and watch it by myself, where I could have paid $10 and gone to the movies. There are some projects where I'm happy to shell out, tens of dollars to take my family. And so I think the optionality, to your point, everything becomes complementary. The ratios may evolve, but everything becomes complementary.
I hope it's a happy combination of both.
Yeah.
Because I think there are movies that you absolutely cannot miss in the theaters.
Yeah.
There's some that you'll want to wait, and then there's some that you want to watch over and over again. That
That's a good point,
you'll watch in the theater and then watch.
But you'd agree it has changed what we consider our competitors now, right? In terms of
everyone's a competitor,
and everyone really has a voice. It's more of a democracy, really, I guess. Let me turn to Guad Venegas. He's at FIU. He has a question from one of our students. Hey, Guad.
Hi, Lester. Good morning, and good morning to all from Miami. We're here at FIU with the students excited to get involved with the conversation. Sephora Hayes has a question. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Based on data and analytics from your projects, I'd like to know, what do you think viewers would like to see more of?
Who wants to take that? Val?
Sure. I will be running this company when I know the answer to that question. I think viewers would like to see more. I think coming off of COVID, we've realized that viewers, and this isn't an absolute, but that they want to see a little bit more happiness, a little bit more escapist. I think that is why things like A White Lotus have been so successful. People like, seeing, people, and by the way, that's not all happy, because there is a little bit of mystery to it, but the beautiful landscapes and things like that. Even something, again, like Poker Face, that has been a kind of a lighter version of a murder mystery show. I think that we have seen a little bit more of an upbeat version of shows being a little bit more successful these days, as opposed to really dark of darkness. So that might change, but I think that's what people want to see.
I think in the news space, one thing that has resonated, and I'm sure you guys have seen this also, is kind of a gravitation towards trusted sources. In a world where there's so much information, and anyone can be a journalist just through the lens of their own devices. I think where we've seen success are in brands like Nightly News and brands that have been established, where people know the source is trusted, the information is trusted, the consistency of that same face coming into their living room, whether it's morning, noon, or night. I think as the world evolves and as opportunities expand as far as where people can get content from, in the news space, that's something that I think has resonated.
All right. I want to ask, this is a question to Karen B. How do you know when you've hit on a good story that you can develop into a Telemundo series? I mean, we talked a moment ago. These are big money commitments. You're rolling a dice on something that maybe you like, and you're hoping the audience will like as well.
I think there are two sides, and I call them one quantitative and one qualitative. The qualitative is your gut. When you're in a pitch, like Val was saying, and you just can't get enough of it, or you're reading scripts and you can wait to get more. That's a good sign already, but that's not enough. We need data, right? So we have processes to greenlight a project, and you work with different groups of people. You work with analysts that do deep analysis on the stories, on the characters. Do they relate to your audience? Are we, creating, for U.S. Hispanics, for example, personal transformation, empowerment, rack to riches tend to work really well. We also work with our research teams, obviously, on concept testing, pilot testing. That's very important to understand how people feel with one episode instead of with the whole version.
But you're looking for something that you can stretch across an arc.
We do. Yeah. We do tend to, and this is only new for us, creating more than 1, 2. We are right now with El Señor de los Cielos in 8th season, so more than 750 episodes we put on the air with this character, and it's just because people loved him. and people root for him. And he's a ladies' man. He loves his family and defends them, against anything. But he's a drug lord. But people root for him, right? So we got to keep extending his journey.
It's a different world you live in.
Yeah, exactly, different world. But back to our quantitative sign. Then we work with our development committee and we analyze all of it. And if those two check marks are there, the gut and the data, we think there may be a hit. But you never know. It's always a risk.
It is fascinating. We'll be talking about, hey, are you watching? That's the question of the day. Let's get to a question from our audience. Isabel wants to know, what is NBC doing to address inclusion and intersectionality in storytelling across mediums? Obviously, the big priority throughout the company. Rashida, you want to take that?
Sure. Specifically talking about news, I think one thing that's kind of revolutionized this for us is our chairman Cesar Conde's 50% challenge. And so very early in his tenure here, almost 3 years ago at this point, he established this guidance that 50% of our staff will be either women or people of color. And so when you set that expectation at the top and then it trickles down throughout the organization, you start seeing real change. You start seeing change in how we hire, how we recruit, from where we bring in employees. And so I think creating kind of a from the top down expectation has really helped. I think programs like NBCU Academy are a really good example of that, where it is part of our DNA to find opportunities to go from the classroom to the newsroom, to build the newsroom of tomorrow. Yvette Miley, who put this whole thing together and runs this, and Cesar announced today that she's been elevated to Executive Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity, because it's that important, because it is important for us to do business. It's good for business, it's good for the future of our industry, and I think we've just made it as a part of our culture. Okay,
and Karen, let me ask you, the parks are not just about thrilling rides and scenery. The people behind the scenes contributed to the experience and atmosphere of storytelling. How does that all come together?
So we also use a lot of data analytics in our work, do a lot of testing. But more than anything, what we want to do is work very closely with the creators of those stories, because any story we tell, any environment we create, we want that authenticity to come through. That only comes through if you have the real voice of the creator in it. It's challenging because generally you're talking to people who have created something that is two-dimensional at best, right? So it's much harder to create the reality of it and make it 360 degrees real to people, and it does take a lot. The parks business it's probably deceivingly complicated. You don't think about it that way, and we're glad you don't think about it that way. We want you to step in and not think about it. But it is like running a small city, and we have so many, just dozens and dozens of different divisions of experts that work together to create these things. Most people think about it as just the creative group, who are brilliant in creating those the attractions and how we deliver the attractions, the ride delivery systems, the technology, but also behind that is all the people who have to operate it every day and who have to make sure it's running every day and it's safe, and that really takes a small city. So there's so much to do in that business, and there's so much collaboration that happens. I did want to say something on the diversity front.
Sure.
Though. Look at the panel. Yeah. I mean, this is pretty impressive. I think about, we're all very committed to diversity, and a lot of us came up in businesses that probably did not look like this. I know I didn't. But that is the world changing, and for me, that is NBCUniversal putting their money where their mouth is, right? Because this is, I think, the best possible way to create access and really create real diversity throughout the company.
And what I think is neat is you've got young people who are coming in. This is all they know.
Yes.
It's a place that
I love it. I love it.
This was not part of the stacking of the guests. This is just how it works out. Let's head back to Guad Venegas, who's with students at Florida International University. Hello again, Guad.
Lester, I am going to speak to one of our freshmen here, Esteban Rodriguez, who has a question specifically for you. Go ahead, Esteban.
Hey, Lester. I just wanted to ask you, since you're reading the news every night, how do you make it your own rather than just read it off a teleprompter? How do you tell the news rather than just
read it?
Well, you know, it gets back down to storytelling. Obviously, within the broadcast, we have individual stories, news stories, people get that. But we also, I try to make a statement really about the broadcast from the moment I say good evening. You know, generally I don't, you know, come out with just, you know, these are the headlines. It's more of a trying to kind of set the stage, set the plate, if you will, for what people are about to watch and why it's important, and you know, to put it in some perspective. It's the most important part of what we do, is to take a story and put it in perspective, make it relevant to what you're seeing around you, what's happening perhaps in your community. You know, is it something you should be afraid of, something you may want to embrace? And again, I try to set that tone right from the beginning of the broadcast. Regular viewers will know from time to time when there's a particularly big story or something that has impacted us in an unusual way. I'll take a minute or two in the broadcast and offer, I'm afraid to use the word commentary because people think of that as an editorial, but essentially to make a comment about where we are in this time. You know, I've done that during, you know, mass shootings, scenes of mass shootings, or at, you know, the height of the pandemic. And that's how I try to embrace the audience and let them know where I'm thinking, and also remind them, you know, that we're all in this together. We're all asking some of these same questions during often turbulent times. So I appreciate the question. I didn't think I would get any.
Not used to the tables being turned.
I know. Just grilled me. All right. Val, we've got a pre-recorded question. This comes from Aaron Wesley from Langston University. Here it is.
My question is, because the 16 to 24-year-old demographic is the primary audience for new media, how do you keep the current audience engaged?
That's a great question, Val.
How do I keep the current audience engaged? Well, I think the biggest way to keep the current audience engaged is to give a variety of content. I think if you keep serving the same thing over and over again, they get bored. So I think that's the most important thing, a diversity of content. And I think we're doing a pretty good job across all our platforms, across Telemundo, across TV streaming, across news. I think we do a fantastic job.
And Rashida, in the cable and the broadcast world, I mean, demographics are very important. But that's the question brings up a good point. You don't want to alienate others. Groups.
Yeah, you know, I think one thing we've all had to do is find ways to bring variety of how we distribute content. So it's not only the stories that you're telling, because I do think there are some commonalities that go beyond, you know, age groups. You know, good storytelling is good storytelling often, and that applies elsewhere, everywhere. But I think the real change for us has been, you know, I'm old enough to remember when people just got their content from the TV screen in their living room. And now you have all of these other platforms for distribution, whether it's social media, if it's online video, streaming, et cetera. And so I think we've all had to be innovative to figure out ways to not only bring the content to where people are consuming, but to shape it in a way that's relevant for that platform. We could do the exact same story on TV, on streaming, on TikTok, and on YouTube, and it may have 4 different presentation styles because people consume differently there. And so I think that's really where the pivot has been. How do you take content that may have been, that works and may be consumed by one demographic on one platform and make it relevant for all platforms?
Here's another question that's come into us. When it comes to your career, can you share the best piece of advice you have ever been given? Karen, how you want to?
The best piece of advice. Well, I said earlier, do what you love to do. I think that's critical advice to anybody. And don't presume you know where you want to be. Give yourself time and take lateral moves in your career. That's one of the best things that I ever did. This is my 15th job since working for Universal. Wow. And so, you know, part of that was because I just get bored easily, so I want to look at other things. And there's so many jobs in the parks industry to work in, but don't predetermine your path of success. Keep trying new things and continue to do the things you love, and stop doing the things you don't like to do, because you're not going to be great at those things.
Let me just put that question around, you know, to get you all reflect on that, Karen B.
For me, cultivate confidence. I think confidence is a better predictor of career success. I learned it myself. And know that competence is not, obviously it's very important, but just doing your job, doing a stellar job is not enough to get ahead. Research says that cultivating confidence, and that makes 79% of your gravitas. So if you think about it, you need to work hard. And as a woman, that has been very important for me, to believe in myself, to make others, this is a new time, but 20 years ago, I was chatting with Karen before. We were sitting in a table with only men, and we were the only women, and having that confidence was very important back then, and I believe it is still today.
Yeah, Val, best advice?
So I have two. One is a little bit on the coattails of that, is take a seat at the table, and it's literal and symbolic. It's that boardroom table. When you go into a meeting, sometimes there's overflow seats on the side, and people, sometimes, usually women and people of color, will kind of, even if those seats at the table aren't filled, will kind of sit on the side because they don't think they deserve the seat at the table. If you walk in, take the seat at the table because you deserve. If you're in the meeting, you deserve to be at that table. So take a seat at the table. So that's one. And then a recent one, we just heard this from Brian Roberts, who was asked, "What's the best advice your father ever gave you?" And it was, "Listen with your mouth closed." And we all now are trying to do that more. So I like
I'm learning a lot right here.
Yeah. I mean, I want to take notes here. Cultivate kindness. I'm going to write that down here when we're done. I'm a collector of best advice, and I've got Post-its all over the place at home and work and everything. One that stuck with me that I heard and reheard recently is, rather than focusing on proving people wrong, prove the people who believed in you right. And so the idea kind of shifts, on its head, this idea of I can persevere in spite of, right? Like we've all had challenges and barriers in our way, but rather than focus on that, really put your energy into the people who believed in you, the people who support you, the people who have mentored you. They believed in you for a reason. Give them a reason to believe in you, and make a negative a positive.
I love that. And Karen and I, before we close, I have to, when we met a moment ago coming in the studio, you mentioned that you had a degree in, you studied journalism.
I did.
And now you're
Come
in,
back over.
now you're in theme parks. I think before we close,
I
want to know how you pivoted, because we've talked a little bit about pivoting and.
So when I was in college, I worked my way through college working in restaurants. And so I fell in love with that business because it's so dynamic and it's so interesting. And it was immediately gratifying. You can change one or two things about an operation and affect the impact and the profitability of that business overnight. And so it was a little bit addictive to me. And my career has kind of been all about that. I will say one other piece of advice I would give you is learn as much as you can about the company that you work for. Not just your area of business, but all the areas of business. Figure out how that company, what is the proposition, what is the product, how do they generate revenue, how do they generate profit, how do they accrue cost. If you understand all of those things really, really well, it allows you to make decisions very quickly and prioritize very easily. And so it makes you really effective. And deliver results.
Well, proud to have
whatever
you all.
you're doing.
Proud to have you all as colleagues. I'm glad we were all under the same corporate roof. And what a really great conversation. Rashida Jones, Karen Irwin, Val Borland, and Karen Barredo. Thanks so much for your time. The great conversation. That's all for me. Thank you for watching.